Today on Locked On Canadiens, a Habs Kings preview, where will Martin St. Louis fall in terms of Habs history, and an update on our All-Decade Team project.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi there, everyone, and welcome to episode 968. We are, as you know, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day, and we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. My name is Laura Saab, also known as the Active Stick, and I'm not joined, as always, by the wonderful Scott Matla, who is off tonight. I am flying solo, and today we'll be having a conversation about the All-Decade Team. I'll update you guys. First, I'll talk to you about what it is, and then I'll update you on some of the responses we've received. We are also going to talk about Martin St. Louis in response to a mailbag question from a lovely listener, one of our friends of the show. But first, I want to talk to you about the Habs-LA Kings game. And we'll do that preview in our first segment. So, obviously, the LA Kings are a fantastic team. They are truly... Honestly, I feel like I don't want to say a juggernaut, but they are so good. They're so good right now. They are currently 5th in the entire league, and their point percentage or win percentage is .750, which is in comparison to the Canadiens, which are at exactly 500 right now. Exactly 500, and they are all the way down 22nd in the standings out of 32. The Los Angeles, if that's not scary enough, the Los Angeles Kings have won 15 of their games, lost 4, and lost 3 in overtime or shootout. They are currently on a 2-game winning streak, but here's the thing. They have won 7 of their last 10 games. They lost 2. They lost 1 in overtime. So we know, because the Canadiens were one of those teams that they beat. They didn't just beat the Canadiens. They embarrassed the Canadiens. They played so well against them. They practically ran the Habs out of their building. Well, not their own building, but, the Staples Center or whatever we call it now. That arena. So where the Canadiens are right now, they're coming off a massive win. They had a great showing in their last game, which was on Monday night against the Kraken. So much so that we were poised in our 3-up, 3-down. We were poised and ready to say that the Canadiens had multiple downs. And then as a result of that game, we flipped a lot of that on their head, right? Josh Anderson obviously finally scored a goal, but he played really well. And also it's a winning combination, I guess, putting him around the fourth line, fourth line. I think he's a serviceable second liner, but really on the third line, he seems to really be finding his game, or he seems to be playing the best when he's there. And then the other thing too is that Juraj Slafkovsky, despite not getting onto the score sheet, had a phenomenal game. He played he was all over the ice. He made it so hard for the opponents to play against. He controlled so much of the play. He really started to show signs of what made him a number 1 overall pick. And it's been actually a really interesting couple of days, because since that game, a lot of the listeners in the comments or some of the discourse I've been seeing around is that maybe, it is paying off for the Canadiens to be patient with him. Maybe he is learning things. I think for me, I'm impatient to see him on the top line. I'm impatient to see him where he's supposed to be when the Habs contend. So that's why a lot of the times I'm kind of griping about, Why are they playing him too few minutes? Why are they not playing him on the line that he's suited to? Why are they playing him with this guy or that guy or that's not working? I have a lot of faith in Juraj Slafkovsky's potential. I think he hasn't even begun to scratch the surface, and I think it's there. I know there's a lot of debate about this. I know a lot of people might disagree with me, but I truly feel that that potential is there, and that is how I feel very strongly that it's there. So what I like sort of went off on a tangent here. We also talked about how Samuel Montembeault really played well in that Kraken game. We talked a lot about how the defense was not as abysmal as it usually is. It's not always abysmal. Like sometimes it just feels very lost. Like the defense just feels very put together. And obviously the injuries are not helping the Canadiens. But I think that I don't necessarily expect them to win against the LA Kings, not because I'm not a Habs fan or not a good fan or whatever. I just think the Kings are too good and the Canadiens aren't. They're not there yet, right? Like the Kings were in this position a few years ago. I'm not worried about the Canadiens overall long term. I just don't think this is going to be the funnest of games for a Montreal Canadiens fan. But I think the three keys to the game really, really is to be able to take and keep possession of the puck, right? The the Kings play a very strong puck possession game, and the Canadiens need to take that away from them. They need to capitalize on any mistakes the Kings make because they don't make very many. If you look at their individual stats and things like that, they don't really have many people that stand out at this point in the season. It looks to be more like a committee by committee thing. I was trying to look at the underlying numbers too and try to compare the two teams, but I wasn't super well versed in that. So I wasn't really able to truly articulate why the Kings just are so much better than the Canadiens right now. But it does, like, they have a full team buy-in. Every single person's committed. It's not one superstar. There are superstars or superstar potentials on that team. It's just not one taking over the entire show. They are getting, solid everything at the moment. So the Canadiens really have their work cut out for them. And also, like as with everything, the Canadiens need to stay disciplined. I sometimes find that even though we've talked so much about how their even strength game has improved this season, they do seem to have a habit of killing their own momentum either by taking an inopportune penalty or having a power play that then that's not inspiring, that doesn't really do much, isn't really creative, and seems to stifle their creativity a little bit. So Habs fans, sorry, not Habs fans, the three keys to the game for the Montreal Canadiens are: capitalize on any mistakes LA makes, try and take control of the game early, because if you let the Kings in, they're just going to run away with it, as we have seen literally a couple weeks ago. And also try and keep the game at even strength for as much as you possibly can. I think that's it for me for the Kings game. We're going to see what it is. It's not that I'm not excited about it or I'm not hopeful for it. I think the Canadiens just have their work cut out for them. And obviously we will be back to recap that game, and we will have your mailbag questions, but I did want to talk about one of said mailbag questions because it's pretty topical. People are still talking about it in the comments or in our replies or in our DMs. So I did want to bring it up and go over it a little bit. And that is the topic of Martin St. Louis as Habs coach. I did grab it out of the mailbag, and it's from one of our good friends. And we will be talking about that truly in just one moment here on Locked On Canadiens. But first, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. As the weather gets colder, which it is today, I was shoveling snow and I froze and I'm still cold. It was hours ago and I'm still cold. The NFL offers are still going to stay hot on FanDuel. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. You heard me right. $150. That's $150 if your team wins. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than now. And guess what? The app is so easy to use. There is a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. You can also bet on the NHL. There's so much stuff going on in the NHL right now. Maybe you still have faith in Cole Caulfield to recover his game and score more than 40 goals this season, score a total of 40 goals this season, that's something that you can bet on. So all you got to do is visit fanduel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL and us. All right, so I wanted to bring up a mailbag question because I thought we could make a topic out of it, and it comes from our good friend. So I'm just gonna dig it up here. It comes from our good friend Claude S. In our emails, and it's about Martin St. Louis. Hi guys, you may want to throw this email in the poo-poo pile, but please hear me out. While Marty's the right coach for the moment, do you think he'll be able to transition from a member of the development team to a winning coach? Will he be able to work the refs, shorten his bench, sit a vet, spark the team in game rather than in between periods, call timeouts when needed and not when expected, or rely on instincts and emotion rather than analytics? In other words, do whatever it takes to win the game in front of him. I ask because I'm old enough to remember the puck bouncing off a sliding Henri Richard in 1966 to win the cup. It's not a textbook goal, but a winning goal. I just want to be around to see Suzuki do the same before I croak. Well, first of all, please don't croak. But I think this is a really interesting question, and I actually really like it because we've talked a lot recently. You know, it's not just us, it's the Habs fan zeitgeist, blah, blah, blah. Talking about whether Martin St. Louis is a good coach or a bad coach. And we've talked a lot about how he's a learning coach, right? And there's a learning curve for him too. And we talked in, I think, in our most recent episode, that there's not like, it's an instinct. I think it is. It's like a learned instinct a little bit of Martin St. Louis to kind of default to old school coaching habits when something goes wrong. Like Scott and I talked about, like some of the in-game decisions, the lineup decisions, playing the veterans too long, putting veterans out on situations where instead of giving, a younger, newer player an opportunity in certain situations, what do you have to lose? You're in a rebuilding year, blah, blah, blah. So we've talked a little bit about that. And so it's interesting here that Claude says a member of the development team. I mean, the timing of Martin St. Louis' hiring obviously was to coincide with year zero of the rebuild. And Kent Hughes and Jeff Gorton definitely saw something in him that would lead them to believe that he's the right coach for a developing team, right? Like they talk a lot about hockey. He's probably impressed them. And, Kent Hughes talks about like going to dinner with Marty and talking for so many hours about hockey strategy and things like that. So they clearly see something in him on that front, and they clearly trust him to work with younger players. We know that he's a very inspirational leader. His players want to run through a wall after he comes and he talks to them, whether it's like before a game, in between periods, which, Claude does point out. Whether it's before a game, he's the kind of guy that players really want to play for. They really want to succeed for, because he's an inspirational person in terms of how he handles them, how he deals with them, how he talks to them, right? He's got that persona. He's got that leadership. But at the end of the day, some questions are: will he be able to work the ref, shorten his bench, sit a vet? Will he be able to make the hard decisions? I think Claude is asking. Would he be rather to rely on instincts and emotion rather than analytics? I think this is the thing that I feel about analytics, is that within the game, any game, I don't think analytics really come into play. Analytics come into play before and after the game. By that, I mean, it's something where a coach or a management team or whoever front office needs to look at the analytics over time to kind of learn how their players are trending, to kind of learn, like which situations or which line mates or whatever do players have better results with, things like that. But in the game, I think it moves too fast. I think you have to rely on instincts and emotion. And sometimes the instincts and emotions, like we talked about, default to old school stuff, old school like tactics. So I like that quote says, "Do whatever it takes to win the game in front of him." Not a great goal, but a winning goal, right? So I think Martin St. Louis, when the time comes, will he be able to transition from a member of the development team to a winning coach? I think it's possible. I think there's strong potential for it too. Not just possibility, but potential. And the reason that I say that is because he's still learning, right? We're talking about that. He's still learning. Presumably, by the time the Canadians get to a time when they're contending or winning or whatever, he will have learned so many lessons between now and then, so many strategies, so many ways of analyzing the game, so many ways of looking at things. I truly think that he will be able to adapt. I think he's just right now, he's not adapting fast enough for our liking, or he's not adapting in the directions that we want him to adapt into, right? I think he's still figuring it out. I mean, if we're willing to be patient with Yuri Slafkovsky, which I know some of you are not, we should be able to be patient with Martin St. Louis, which again, I know some of you are not. I do think that within Habs history, Martin St. Louis will be a coach that has a long chapter with the Montreal Canadiens. And I think that he will be associated with winning. I don't know if he's going to be associated with winning the Stanley Cup, but he'll be associated with winning in terms of maybe they have a really, really good season, like a really good regular season, or maybe they make the playoffs more consistently than they have in recent years, or maybe he brings out the best in some guys like Nick Suzuki or Cole Caulfield or Yuri Slafkovsky. Don't forget that those three players, well, Slafkovsky not so much this season, but Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield this season are comparatively quiet. So I think that has a lot to do with it. If Cole Caulfield was scoring as expected, I don't think we would be having these conversations about Marty. I really, really don't. So anyway, Claude, I really hope I answered your question in a very roundabout way. And I want you to know that I always appreciate you sending us emails. You always have something thoughtful to say and something to make us think. And I find that exciting and I find that interesting. But I think that Martin St. Louis will be around for a while. I think the Habs will be as patient with him as they're going to be with their team. And he's going to learn. Like he's like, this is the thing. He's still learning. And he's going to learn a lot. Like he's the kind of guy that I think, in this off season, if things don't go well, he's going to start meeting with coaches that he respects and admires to talk about what things went wrong. I don't think he has a problem motivating his players. I don't think any of his players come to games without or lacking motivation. I think sometimes they lack the ability. Let's be honest. Sometimes they lack the physical health, right? Like there's a lot of injuries and nagging things like that. But I think that he's a really great motivator. I think he's going to work on his strategic thinking. Like clearly the Habs brass see something in him on that front. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how it continues. And so for our next segment, very, very awkward transition there. I need my co-host. I honestly feel like I'm very, very lost without him all the time. But in our next segment, we are going to talk about the All-Decade Team. Like, what is it? I talked about it a couple weeks ago or a week and a half ago. So I'm going to bring you up to speed on that, and I'm going to talk about a couple of the All-Decade teams that have been sent to us in this in the last couple of weeks. But that's all coming up in our next segment. But first, this episode is also brought to you by Gametime. How often do you find out an artist that you love is going to be in town and you fear you missed the boat on buying tickets, resulting in a mad scramble to get your hands on some? I mean, right now, it is the holidays. You are going to be wanting to get gifts, and this is going to be a bigger problem unless you get Gametime. Because getting tickets should not be stressful, particularly when you're trying to get some for a loved one to show them how much you care at this time of the year. Gametime has flash deals and it's so easy to use. It is the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. And your all in prices show your total upfront, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. Buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, so let me talk about the all-decade team that we referred to a couple of weeks ago in this episode. On this podcast. But before I get to it, let me quickly remind everybody that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports of the day with the local expert of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, let's get into it. Our good friend Charles on Twitter sent us it was a mailbag question that I turned into a challenge that we can all be part of. And his initial question was, let me find it so that I can phrase it exactly with what he said. All right. Okay, this is the question. Make a decade's starting lineup of one Habs star from the year 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010, and 2020, plus one substitute you can pick from any decade. So we still haven't answered Charles's actual mailbag question, not because we don't like him, we actually adore him, but because Scott and I haven't had a mailbag together when we would be able to address this. We had Jerome Berube on our last mailbag on Friday. You absolutely have to check that episode out. It is one of the favorite ones that we've done all season. Anyway, so I will be asking Scott that exact question. But what I decided to do after I received this question is turn it into a fun thing we can all be part of. And so I said, instead of doing it each year, take one player from each decade, but you have to start in 1970. So you can't use the 40s, 50s, 60s. You cannot do that. Or, the 20s. You have to start in 1970. So take one player from the 1970s, one from the 80s, one from the 90s, one from the 2000s, one from the 2010s, and for good measure, 2022 today. And choose one player and create a starting lineup out of that. So I sent that out, or I talked about it on an episode by myself, but I want Scott to get involved as well. And we wanted to hear all of yours, and then we're going to put all of them together, and we're going to create this team together. Like, this is going to be a listener exercise. And we have received quite a few responses. So let me pull up a couple right now and just kind of read them to you. All right. So we've got one from Ed. So Lafleur, Guy Lafleur, obviously, Larry Robinson, Patrick Roy, Saku Koivu, PK Subban, and Cole Caulfield. All right, so on the wings, you've got Guy Lafleur and Cole Caulfield on either side, and they're centered by Saku Koivu. That's an interesting choice from the 2000s. Backstop by Patrick Roy, obviously. And then on defense, you've got Larry Robinson playing with PK Subban. I absolutely adore this. I really, really do. And I think it's interesting because I feel like we're going to see a common thread in some of them. And then we're going to see some wildly differing opinions. But I think that that's a really, really, really fun fun response, and I'm looking forward to hearing all of the other ones. Sorry, it looked like I lost my connection for a bit there, but I don't think that happened. Sorry, I'm here. I'm here. So we've got one from our good friend Bill Van V. And the question is, sorry, the response is, I loved slash hated this exercise. I enjoyed the process, but to leave certain players off the teams killed me. I chose a first team and a second team. Oh, yes, in that episode, I did say you could do it like the All Stars and do a first and second team. Due to the construction of the teams, I had to leave certain players off that were heartbreaking, including Ken Dryden, Steve Shutt, Mats Naslund, Chris Chelios, and Alexei Kovalev. After agonizing choices, here are my teams. The first team is obviously left wing Vincent Danfous, center Saku Koivu. So Danfous is from the 90s. Saku Koivu is obviously from the 2000s. From the 70s, you've got Guy Lafleur. I'm pretty sure everybody's going to be picking Guy Lafleur from the 70s. PK Subban from the 2010s, Shea Weber from the 2020s, and then Patrick Roy from the 1980s. And this is interesting. The second team has Brian Savage from the 90s, Stéphane Richer from the 80s, Cole Caulfield from the 20s, Andrei Markov from the 2000s, Larry Robinson, obviously, and Carey Price from the 2010s. Sorry, Larry Robinson from the 70s. And Carey Price from the 2010s. So these are two really, really interesting responses, which I absolutely loved. And I want you guys to keep it coming. These aren't the only two we received. These are the only two that I'm reading today. We're going to keep this going. Scott and I haven't decided when we're going to actually end it and start the voting and all of that, but we want to hear yours first, and then we're going to put it to voting, and then we're going to present your choices, obviously our choices as well, but your choices, like our overall choices. At some point, we're thinking in the new year. And finally, I did want to, I know it's like we're way past Thanksgiving, but I wanted to shout out our good friend Doghouse and and present quickly Doghouse's opinions on our Thanksgiving dinner draft. So for American Thanksgiving, Scott and I did a draft of food, or Thanksgiving related foods. So I got a lot of flack for choosing ham first, as opposed to turkey, but I still believe in my choices. And so here are Doghouse's um, uh, responses to our Thanksgiving draft. So he says, this is likely being sent too late as I just listened to your Thanksgiving draft. Well, it's a couple weeks after Thanksgiving and I'm still talking about this. Doghouse says, Laura wins on a shootout with her soup choice. Yum. But you both really blew it. So here are Doghouse's choices. Appetizers, mushroom caps stuffed with stuffing and a nice cheese blend, cooked so the stuffing is crispy. Laura's soup is the outsider invited for dinner and welcome with open tummies and arms. Main dish is turducken and honey roasted ham, and the side dishes are cooked carrots with brown sugar and butter and cinnamon. Macaroni with the crunchy breaded topping. You did not mention the topping, Scott, when you chose mac and cheese. Green beans as Laura described. So I said green beans not in the form of a casserole, but stir fried with like almond slivers and really delicious garlic and stuff like that. Garlic mashed potatoes, sweet potato casserole, also with brown sugar and cinnamon, outside of the bird stuffing. And dessert choices is key here. Pumpkin pie, the one from Costco, is delicious with heavy whipped cream. French apple pie with a good quality vanilla ice cream, and you make sure you heat the apple pie. Finally, a drink. Apple cider with the option of adding Fireball cinnamon for those over 18, which is the legal drinking age in Canada. So Doghouse, thank you for your choices. I got a lot of heat for picking the ham over the turkey, but I stand by my choice. I stand by all my choices, and I still think I won that draft. I believe somebody responded. It might have actually been our boss, Sean Woodley, and somebody said picking ham right out of the gate with your first pick overall is sheer lunacy. So either way, I don't care. I'm sticking by my choice. And we're at the end of the show now. And tomorrow is our recap of the LA Kings game. And also, we will have more mailbag questions and we will put Scott on the spot with the all-decade teams. And we'll start collecting more and doing the votes as we get closer to the holidays. It'll be a fun activity for all of us to do. And don't forget, We've got so much coming up. The World Juniors are coming. There's going to be so much to talk about in the next little while. So don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. You can email us mailbag questions or any opinions or thoughts at lockedoncanadians@gmail.com. You can also leave comments in the YouTube comments and put mailbag question or MBQ or something like that, so we know you want us to bring it up on the mailbag episode. You can also find us on Twitter at LO_Canadians. We thank you so much for listening, and we will talk to you next time.